Shalom everyone, welcome back. This week we'll be discussing Parshat Bo. So this week is the turning point in Jewish history. In our Parsha we're going to meet the first mitzvah. In our Parsha we're going to conclude the 10 plagues. So we're going to learn about the plague of Arbe, the locust that comes in, the worst plague in Egyptian history. Never before was there a plague like this, never after was there a plague like this. So many locusts that you couldn't see the sky. Egypt turned dark. And Pharaoh panics. Paro sends word to Moshe. He says, Aaron, I've messed up here. Forgive me. You guys have to end this plague because it's death. And so Moshe and Aaron, they pray. And when Moshe prays, so the plague of the Arbe ends. And then obviously Paro does not let us leave Egypt. And Moshe brings on the second to last Makkah, the Makkah of Choshech. And Egypt turned so dark that the pasuk says that the people didn't move. If you were sitting, you didn't get up. If you were standing, you didn't sit. For 3 days, that was the level of darkness. Even though afterwards the darkness eased up, but the plague of darkness really was a change in all the nature of Egypt. And the Jews, the pasuk says, they had light. So what happens when there's a blackout around the world? People take advantage of it. But the Jews did not take advantage of it. And even though the Egyptians could see that the Jews had light, even as they were sitting in the dark, they saw the Jews with light, and they also saw that the Jews were not taking advantage of them, because when the plague was over, they checked their belongings, and they saw they weren't robbed. Everything was where it should be. And then Hashem tells Moshe, we're up to the last plague. From the very beginning, Moshe's had the staff, the mate, that came out of the Garden of Eden, and engraved on it was the Tzach Adash Ba'achav, the acronym of the 10 plagues. So he knew where we were headed all along. And now we're up to the final plague, Makas Bechoros, which is a double plague. That's why it's called Makkah Bechoros, the plague of the firstborn. Because when the firstborn heard that the next plague would bring about their demise, so they scampered to Paro and they said, you got to let them go, we don't want to die. And when they saw Paro wasn't listening, so civil war ensued. And there was first a war between the firstborns and the rest of the Egyptians. Now this in its own right was a turning point in Egypt, because in Egypt until this point, and probably after this point, they worshipped the firstborns. The Bechoros, the firstborns in Egypt, were worshipped as idols. The Egyptian firstborn and the Jewish firstborn. And Hashem tells Moshe, on midnight, I'm going to go through Mitzrayim, and all the firstborns will be hit by me. Now, technically, the Jewish firstborns were also idols in Egypt. So Hashem says, no, but I'm going to have mercy. I will be poseach. Poseach means one of two things. Either I will have compassion. Pesach is the holiday of compassion. Or pasach ufasachti, I will pass over, which is the more commonly known name of this holiday. So Hashem says, either I will have mercy over your homes and protect your firstborns, or I will pass over your homes, and even though your firstborns were also idols, I will not allow them to be hit. And here we start seeing the tremendous love that Hashem has for us, like a father that says, don't discuss with me whether my child deserves it or not. They're my children. And that love is revealed on this night, and that's one of the explanations why we as a Jewish people start with the holiday of Pesach, the holiday of love, compassion, where Hashem showed, you're mine. We have a special relationship. Beni Bechori Israel, my chosen son is Israel. And so when the plague of the firstborn is going to hit, it is midnight of the night of Pesach. And Hashem says to the Jewish people, your first mitzvah is to sanctify this month. You will look at the calendar differently. If world calendars always begin with the beginning of the agrarian year, the way the school year begins, the way all calendars begin, the Jewish year, we count our months in a different way. We count our months from Nisan, from the month where we left Egypt, where we became free men. HaChodesh Hazeh Rosh Chodeshim, when we count months, our month number 1 is the month of Nisan. And the Jewish calendar is the mitzvah, the first mitzvah we received. As free men, we would take control of our time, and we would celebrate forever this day, the 14th and 15th of Nisan, where we became free men in Egypt. And on the 14th of Nisan, the Jews took that same sheep that they had been worshipping their whole lives in Egypt, and they slaughtered it, and then they roasted it whole. And this was a declaration, we believe in Hashem. The Egyptians don't threaten us. We can put the blood of the sheep around our doorposts, and we're not scared of the Egyptians. Hashem said that we're coming out as free men, so we don't have to hide the fact that we're eating the Egyptian god on this night. Now, the Egyptians believed that their god was most dangerous, was most formidable on the 15th of this month in the zodiac, the month which is the sign of the sheep. And the Jews also believed that. They also grew up in Egypt worshiping the sheep. And now they would show their allegiance to Hashem. And at the moment where the Egyptians believed their God was most powerful, midnight, that's the moment where Hashem goes through Egypt and destroys every single idol in Egypt. And for every year since then, we commemorate the night of Pesach as we sit with our children. The Torah commands us in this week's Parsha, tell your children what happened here. Tell them about the great miracles that showed you that Hashem is running the world. He runs nature. Tell your children how Hashem made fun of the Egyptians. They believed in the Nile as a god. It all turned to blood. They believed the frog was a god of fertility. Look at what the frog attacked them with the next plague. They believed their firstborns were gods, so Hashem killed them on this night. And on midnight of this night, every year, we conclude our Seder. We, the Jewish people, we have a mitzvah in this week's Parsha. We tell our children the story. We tell them how we left Egypt. The Parsha concludes with the mitzvah of telling our children, we're wearing tefillin. Why do we wear tefillin? We're eating matzah. Why do we eat matzah? In the days of the temple, we'd bring a Paschal offering every year on this day. And we tell our children we're doing this because this is what happened on this day. Hashem took us out and made us into the greatest nation of all time, the eternal nation, the people of Israel. Shabbat Shalom.